Larian Studios have given us all the details on character creation in Baldur's Gate 3. Now, unless you only play Witcher 3 and you hate everything else, creating your own character is one of the most important elements of most RPGs. Is your character going to be a tough, strength-focused monstrosity, or is it going to be more like a wizard focused on sorcery and magic? Perhaps you want your character to be good looking, or maybe instead you want it to look like one of those demented Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion NPCs. The choice is yours, the choice will be yours in Baldur's Gate 3, so let's jump in and talk about all these new details. Hi, Stelden here. I thought we'd had all the pre-early access news for this game, but Larian have surprised us with one last community update before it all goes live for Baldur's Gate 3 on October 6. Of course, character creation is the focus for Larian's new update that's come out, and the first thing to note is that it's all quite a bit more complex than Divinity Original Sin 2's customization. This time around, we're going to have 8 core races, and while you're going to have your standard fantasy races, you'll also be able to pick a drow, a tiefling, or even a Githyanki. And within all these races, there's also going to be 16 sub-races. I will mention that this is for early access, and I've heard we're going to have at least 9 races in the official release, but we'll see how that all pans out. So everything I'm talking about, it's just for early access. Things will change as it goes on, leading up to the official release. Now, if you're not super familiar with Dungeons & Dragons and you're just into the video game side, you might not know what all these races are. So to start off with, a dwarf is basically a small... Okay, no, look, I'm not going to dumb it down that much. We're not Ubisoft here. I'm sure we all know what a dwarf is, so let's move on. A Githyanki, though, that is a different story. That one's a bit more advanced than your basic sword and sorcery race. So to give you some details, basically they are warriors trained with silver blades, and they like to fly into battle on red dragons. You may have seen one of them in some of the promotional material for this game. They're green, they're mean, and you'll notice they've got these black spots on their face as well. Certainly a good choice for someone who wants to appear a little bit more out there as they venture through Baldur's Gate 3. Tieflings are bound to Nessus, which is the deepest layers of the Hells, and the customization options appear to be fairly interesting for them. We saw a tiefling in some of the early footage of the game that's gone out, and they're those big red things with the horns. It looks like they don't have to be red though. There's a number of sub-races you can pick, such as the Zariel Tiefling, which will mean you can be a different colour. You can be blue, you can adjust your eye colour to make yourself look even more nasty. So they look to be one of the more creative options in the game. The other fairly unique race is the Drow. Old school Baldur's Gate fans will of course remember Drist, a classic character who is of course one of those Drow. Most of them are evil aligned, and you will get to try out some sub-races too in early access, including the Seldrin Drow and the Lolthsworn Drow, the latter having been marked by Lolth, and they have these bright red eyes to ensure that the Underdark will fear them on sight. So it's a really intriguing option if that's your thing. I did joke about the classic fantasy races, but the sub-races make the more basic choices all the more interesting. You don't just have elves, you've got the wood elves from Faerun's Forest, you've got the drow half-elves from the Underdark, you've got the stealthy Lightfoot halflings, as well as the shield dwarves, who wish to restore their ancestral homelands. The list goes on, so you're going to have a ton of choices throughout Baldur's Gate 3, which should give you hundreds of hours in early access if you do want to mix things up with multiple playthroughs. Something to note also is if you choose one of the more peculiar races, such as the Githyanki, NPCs will react quite differently to you, given most have never seen that race before in their lives. Larian confirms there's going to be over 600 NPCs in Act 1 itself, and plenty of them will likely have unique dialogue options if you choose a race like that. Now, I imagine that some of them might just make an offhand comment when you initiate dialogue, rather than offering really unique conversation, but it's still pretty cool and interesting. It reminds me of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, where if you choose a particular type of vampire, you get to have a unique conversation with a stop sign. It's pretty awesome stuff. It's not all just about your appearance and history though, because for plenty of people, it's all about the class you pick and how that affects your gameplay. In early access, you're going to have 6 classes to choose from, and again, this is not the full release of the game, so we're going to see more as time goes on. Every single one of those classes is also going to have subclasses to choose from with a minimum of 2. Although it does need to be pointed out that you're not always going to gain access to those subclasses straight away. Sometimes you're going to get it at level 1, sometimes it'll be level 3, so keep it in mind if you want to mix and match, since you'll sometimes need to progress a little before you can access a brand new option. I do want to mention that Divinity Original Sin 2 had 14 different classes, so for those who aren't that interested in Baldur's Gate and just follow Larian, that will be the difference here. And I can't comment on Divinity Original Sin 2 Early Access. I wasn't a part of that, I bought that game on launch, but it's just something to keep in mind if you're jumping into Early Access for the first time and you find that it's a little bit smaller than the pool you had available in Divinity. The same goes for the magic system, and you're going to notice in Baldur's Gate 3 that if you pick a wizard wizard, for example, you'll get a number of cantrips, which are simple arcane skills that you can use to dazzle or destroy your opponents, as Larian put it. Those will have unlimited use for the most part. More powerful spells, however, they're going to have a limited use. So the way it works is you'll be fighting enemies, you'll be using these spells, but they've got a limited number. You'll get those back when you go and rest somewhere. So let's say you're in a difficult combat encounter, you want to use this really powerful spell, you can't just keep spamming it over and over. You've got a limited number, you've got limited resources. So it adds some strategy and it's a bit of a D&D thing. So people who are only familiar with Divinity should just keep that in mind. For the people who are very cosmetic focused, which I admit I'm not really, I barely care about how my character in-game looks. I'm much more about the gameplay features. But I know that customizing appearance is very important for many people, which I completely respect. And in Baldur's Gate 3, including Early Access, you're going to have a vast array of options to pick from. You've got your voice choices, you've got tattoos, makeup, and of course all of those sub-races I mentioned earlier, they'll often have different appearances, which will naturally mix things up. I imagine that Larian will add to the pool of choices as Early Access goes on, so it'll be worth checking out regularly if you're the type who enjoys that part of the game. Overall, there's a pretty meaty amount of customization for an initial early access, and Larian have stressed that there's going to be a lot of surprises, not just in the future as this all progresses up to full release, but also on October 6th. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of discoveries to be made that haven't been covered in any of these community updates or any of the streams, and that's going to be really awesome for new players to go and discover. I'll certainly be hoping that a lot of the surprises Larian are talking about are also related to the original Baldur's Gate games, and they start to bridge the gap, ensuring we do feel like we're playing the next installment in the series, rather than just a standalone D&D adventure. That's not all though, because more questions have been answered today, which also shed a bit of light on some interesting aspects I've been thinking about. As we know, Baldur's Gate 3 is also launching on Stadia, and at the initial announcement, this worried me. The last thing I want to see is some awful streaming platform funding the game, and potentially compromising certain aspects to suit game streaming, but that doesn't appear to be happening, thankfully. That is because controller support was discussed, and Larian have stressed that mouse and keyboard is going to provide the best experience. Now you can of course use a controller on Stadia, and in the future you'll be able to do it on PC as well, but as Larian have suggested that Stadia players should use a mouse and keyboard, that to me is proof enough that the game is being designed around the mouse and keyboard setup. This may seem like a given to some people, but over the years I've certainly seen mainstream gaming focus on controllers first and foremost, and that has meant that games have been designed around them. For instance, in a lot of modern FPS games, you can't lean anymore. Sometimes you used to be able to in most PC games, where you'd lean like against a wall and you'd use the Q and E keys. They've been removed from so many games altogether because console controllers just don't have enough buttons. So to see Larian sticking with their core PC audience is absolutely good news, and I'm glad it's continuing. Respeccing your character is a solution they're still undecided on, and they're not just talking about classes, they're also talking about race. I'll be honest, I never really respect in the Divinity games, so I prefer just to make choices and stick with them for the whole playthrough, so I'm not overly familiar with how it used to work. I will say though that I think the best solution is for the casual difficulties to be respec friendly, whilst being a bit harsher on it at higher levels. And that's just because I think making choices in a game can feel a bit meaningless if you can just change on the fly. I think it's important for choices to feel meaningful and be final in some cases. Now, if you don't want to make your own character, the origin characters are returning. So for example, kind of like Thane in Original Sin 2, someone you just pick out at the start, you don't make your own. It sounds like you're going to be able to pick your class within them, so you're not going to be locked in just to one. So again, quite similar to Original Sin 2, nothing sounds like it's going to really change there. Also, good news everyone. Romance is optional, so if you want to play soap opera with one of your companions, and you absolutely can, that's awesome, the option is of course there, but if you don't give a shit, you're not going to be forced down that path, and it's not a core element of the game. I assume that would be the case, but in my last video and Larian's last update, romance was a huge topic, and this confirms it's just one of many side features that are available to us. So I think this is going to be the finished, final, done community update before release. Then again, I said that about the last one, and then they sprung this on us, which I'm still pretty surprised about. So that is really cool, and it lets us do a bit more thinking as to what classes and races we want to mix with when our adventure begins. I'll also mention that crafting doesn't sound like it's going to be a big feature of the game. You are going to be able to do it, but it's probably not going to be core or complex, so it's something to keep in mind if you're a big fan of customization in the world of armor and weapons. Now, there's a little secret they revealed too. It's a little mystery to whet our appetites. It starts off that you can pet a dog, but they say we should avoid the owlbear and we should be very, very scared. There is, however, an owlbear cub, a little baby one, so perhaps you can claim one for your own if you do a tough quest or you even defeat a big scary owlbear. It sounds like we're definitely going to find out in early access, so let's see what happens. I feel like I've said this about 5 times in the last couple of weeks, but I'm excited for the game. I think a lot of people probably finished up with Wasteland 3 a little while back, so it is perfect timing for something new. And I do think it's coming out at a great time for RPG fans. With World of Warcraft Shadowlands being delayed, that means the RPG cupboard, aside from Baldur's Gate 3, is going to be pretty bare until Cyberpunk. So that's a good couple of months for people to really dive into this, and I will say that the most important factor is going to be community feedback. A lot of people just love Larian Studios, they don't really care too much about Dungeons and Dragons and that side of the experience. They just want a good Larian game. For those of us who really love Baldur's Gate though, I think it's really important that Larian gets all of our feedback as early access progresses. If it doesn't feel like old Baldur's Gate, that concern needs to be aired. I understand that this is new and not everything can feel like 1999 again, but there is a fair expectation for Baldur's Gate 3 to not just please Larian fans, but also Baldur's Gate fans who never really got into Divinity. Larian and Wizards of the Coast, they put the 3 on this game, and that means something to a lot of fans. I know some people don't care, but it is meaningful to fans of that series. It's a very big series, it's got a lot of history to it. So this is it, early access is coming out in a few days, and I think it's finally too late for there to be like another delay. I've seen stranger things in the industry, but I think we're really going to get it. October 6th, nothing's going to stuff that up. I've already said a few times that I'm really excited to play this, so I'm not going to repeat myself, I'll sound like a broken record, so yeah, October 6th, next time I talk about it, hopefully the game's actually out and we can all dive in and actually look at some brand new stuff and see what we all think. So yeah, pretty keen. I also want to say that I really appreciate all your support with the channel. There's a lot of regular commenters. I always see your names. It always brings a smile to my face when you give your feedback, give your thoughts. It's always really, really awesome. And if you're new here, please consider sticking around. I'm going to keep making videos. I usually try and make around 4 a week, and it's always really fun. So hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks very much for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe if you did. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks again, and bye-bye.